Good morning, good afternoon, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen. We are here to welcome the third day of the online edition of the World Groundwater Congress. That is a result of a combination of the IAH, ALH Sud, and ABA's events. Today, we are starting a session about water security and climate change. This Congress is already the biggest hydrologic event that has ever been happened in the world. In just 2 days, more than 3,600 participants. It's our pleasure to announce the sponsors, supporters, and exhibitors that help so much in this event. The main sponsor is National Water Agency, Water and Sanitation Agency, the new role of ANA. We are today with the support of the River Basin Committee of the São Francisco River, São Francisco River. This panel will be composed by Alice Aureli from the Water Science Division of UNESCO, and Carlos Molano, Vice President of IAH for Latin America and Caribbean. As president of this session, I will be presenting the theme that we are just starting to discuss. I will make brief interventions, letting our panelists to host the most important part of this panel. They will have 20 minutes each to make their presentation. Right after the presentations, we will start the debates with you all that are watching this important panel. Your questions can be sent both by the chat on YouTube or by the app of the Congress. Just access the online event menu, click the name of the activity, and ask there simply. Do not forget the address, those who want to ask your questions. You can make direct questions to the panelists, or you can send the questions to the panel, and we will choose the better way to answer your question. Water resource, water security, groundwater, they are all combined. Water security is not only having water at the right time, in the same where it has to be for the people that need. Water security is more than that. Water security means good governance, means transboundary cooperation, means peace and political stability, means financing. Water security is more than only having infrastructure. Water security is having sustainable activities, economic activities, and development. Water security is having drinking water and human well-being, is assure access to safe, sufficient, and affordable water to meet basic needs of all mankind. Water security is also preserving ecosystems so that they can deliver their services. Water security is also related to hazards, droughts, floods, and especially addressing solutions for climate change. We are living nowadays extreme events all over the world, and we need to discuss this with high responsibility. And for that, we have today on this panel an honor to hear Alice Aureli. Alice is a water resource expert and holds a PhD in hydrology, hydrogeology. She has over 30 years of experience in groundwater resource management and governance. In addition to her many years of research and teaching, she is the chief of UNESCO Groundwater Systems and Water for Human Settlements session. Please, Alice, have the floor and give us your thoughts about this important issue.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. It's an honor, it's a pleasure to be with the friends and the colleagues of this great event, this Congress in Brazil. I feel like I was in Rio de Janeiro, so it's a fantastic feeling. Let me start with a presentation of a few PowerPoint. I think it's more interesting also for the audience. Let's say that water security and water management, water storage are definitely not new problems. Definitely in the ancient history, in the ancient period, our predecessors have taken the issue of water security very seriously. Already 5,200 years ago, a complex state society allowed for more water works and resolution of disputes and over resources. You can imagine that the first document on water project in Egypt are of 3,000 years before Christ. And these were about a great wall to protect Memphis, the capital, from floods. So I mean, the idea of climate variability and how to manage climate variability was very, very soon in the preoccupation of the history. And then the governance issue, as you said in the introduction. I mean, the Hammurabi Code in the 1700 before Christ and started with a water code to have some governance for water resource management. And the Valencia Water Tribunal in the medieval period start setting up some principles for water sharing and use. And then we have all the technology that have evolved to have water security for all like the shaduf that were most probably invented in Mesopotamia around 4,000 years before Christ, the kanats that are the main first water works for groundwater management, and how not to remember the puquillos in Peru, these systems that are so interesting now also for archaeologists. Okay, why UNESCO? Because of course in the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program, our program on water security is definitely the main focus of this particular phase of the IHP. We have definitely looking at water security with a very wide range of facets and a point of view. Well, very recently, in this March, the World Water Assessment Program of UNESCO has presented during the World Water Day the last report, the 2020 report, the World Water Development Report on water and climate change. And I definitely looking at how to resume in very few words some of the main findings and recommendations. Definitely these huge effort of all UN water members and brothers and sisters of the UN agency tell us that, well, yeah, in many regions of the world, the aquifer that present the large storage capacity, often orders of magnitude greater than surface water storage, will be definitely very much impacted by climate change. And what is strange is that despite the critical importance of groundwater resources, that is the largest available store of global fresh water, there is very little attention in the investment in research and studies and knowledge and data collection to better understanding the effects of climate change to groundwater, and in particular groundwater recharge. It is therefore important to quantify the spatio-temporal interaction between groundwater and climate, and the current understanding of global scale sensitivity of a groundwater system to climate change that, well, at the moment, it's quite limited. Combined with a more erratic and uncertain supply, climate change will definitely aggravate the situation of currently water-stressed regions and generate water stress in regions where water resources are still abundant today. If we look at this slide that is from the UN World Water Development Report just published this March 2020, and considering the importance of groundwater for agriculture, we can immediately understand that impacts on groundwater will have direct impacts on the food productions, creating, for example, in this case, arid conditions, as well as countries in which major crops will be under permanent weather conditions due to climate change. So, I mean, we have to prepare to this condition, to this situation, to these impacts. Again, I think we have to make profit of being able to talk to a very large audience and young people and youth that look at the future. That definitely there are good news. I mean, despite challenges, lack of data, etc., we all agree now that groundwater is definitely increasingly being recognized as a key resource for climate change and adaptation measures. Well, UNESCO role is definitely to put together all the different facets related to groundwater resource management, governance, innovations, but also, I mean, climate change and society, and to capture interconnection. So building a cooperation for water security, addressing the different challenges. Looking at the characteristic of groundwater to close interaction between groundwater and land use, and trying to send messages that are better understandable by policymakers in order to have definitely possibility to change behaviors. Apparently, we all agreed that natural hazards are accelerated by the situation of climate change, and definitely we have to look at not only environmental science and water sciences, but also the coordination between social sciences and environmental sciences. Why I say that? Because I mean, looking at the economy of the climate change impact to water security and life security, we know now that, for example, the insurance industry that is definitely the one is investing and managing society's risks was very much vocal to acknowledge the threat of climate change, and also the fact that they remain largely unprepared to address climate risks in the community they serve. So we really need to have a coordination, a cooperations, and interlinkages. Considering about risk, consider about extreme events and the acceleration of natural hazards due to climate change, groundwater again can provide support for emergency situation. In UNESCO, we have studied since many years the vulnerability of groundwater and aquifers with preparing the criteria and recommendations, and definitely prevention it's better than cure, and definitely the precautionary approach is definitely the most important here, and the identification of less vulnerable aquifer system and the management and the monitoring of this system to look at how to react during extreme events and emergency situation. It's a critical issue that decision makers have to take into account and start to invest on these emergency aquifers that give us the possibility to overcome some critical problems. Groundwater is related to food and energy and the whole water system, hydrological cycle. So when we have impacts due to climate change to groundwater resources, definitely these will impact also on the energy and food nexus. So I mean, the main messages again is that when invest to good governance and sustainable aquifer and groundwater resource management, this can result in long-term cost and energy saving. Some activities, a project that we started years ago was Graphic, Global Commitment to Groundwater and Climate Change. And I'm delighted to say that one of the best UNESCO network of the Graphic is in Latin America. Why we did that? We tried to have to translate scientific findings into concrete actions, and to have the possibility to outline policy relevant recommendations for management. There are a very large and long list of publications that are available in the UNESCO site. What we did and what we are continuing to monitor is studies a little bit in all regions, Africa, Asia, Oceania, Europe, etc. And the main large aquifers like the Northwestern Saharan Africa, the Newland Basin in Africa, the Great Artesian Basin, Oceania, and others. What we did is to have a look at the different climate classifications. So we looked at case studies in the different tropical, temperate, continental, polar, and mixed climate situation with experts from everywhere in the world. There are definitely some interesting information over there. It's something that are quite logic and only needed to be proved. Like, for example, the most vulnerable situation in coastal areas and islands, and in particular seas. Well, definitely we have to look still at new technology and innovation, assessment of the impact of climate variability, for example, on groundwater, as we did it in some transboundary aquifers in Africa, with new methodologies like the Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment, GRACE, that is a hope. I mean, the new technology are now providing us always linked with the field study and on-site evaluations and data collection, more information and some new possibility, in particular in areas that are not really known yet, like some African regions. It's not a mystery anymore for anybody that global warming is intensifying precipitation, and the UN World Water Development Report 2020 is really looking at that this will happen, especially in the tropics, producing fewer low and medium events and increasing number of very heavy events. How we can summarize some scientific findings and policy relevant recommendations that we have worked out in UNESCO. Okay, again, need for interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary collaboration. We have to work on global and national monitoring and database programs. We have to overcome temporal lags in responses to land use, change, climate, and pollution. We have to improve understanding of recharge stories and how they improve adaptation and management. We have to have a better knowledge of groundwater response to global scale, oceanic atmosphere, climate variability, ENSO, and the other climatic events. And of course, we need strategic management and governance at domestic and transboundary level. Why? Because as this map of the world, the transboundary aquifer prepared by our international center, IGRAC, in Delft, shows, if climate change is impacting recharge, infiltration, and in several aquifers, when we don't know in a transboundary aquifer countries' capacity to put their information together, definitely this will create a tremendous impact to water security at regional level. Most of these aquifers are shared by 2, 3, 4 countries. And definitely, as you said at the introduction, we need more cooperation between countries to share data on climate change impacts to groundwater resources, in particular in transboundary aquifers. As I said at the very beginning, adaptations approach, precautionary approach are definitely the best secure way for investment, and the management of aquifer recharge is identified as a real methodology in looking at climate change adaptation measures. Management of aquifer recharge, enhanced storage, and can help in treatment of water in aquifers. I mean, there are several technologies. UNESCO is, together with IAEH and a very large number of experts, just publishing in the next weeks a new book on management of aquifer recharge, and some examples of innovation technology for improving management of aquifer recharge. As I said, in the recommendations and the main findings of the UN World Water Development Report on water and climate change, it is highlighted that seeds are and coastal areas are the most vulnerable areas, coastal aquifers and groundwater in seeds. Why this? Because of course groundwater in seeds it's one of the main freshwater resources, because there is a lack of policy and governance in sustainable groundwater resource in seeds, because there is a lack of community involvement in seeds, and because we have to improve adaptive groundwater management, better integrated in agriculture policies. Well, last but not least, I would say, of course, we are all looking at the Agenda 2030 and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and the two goals, one on climate change and the other on water resources, the goal number 6, and the target is 5 by 2030 implement integrated water resources management at all levels, including transboundary cooperation and as appropriate. I should say that in the Agenda 2030, there is no devoted SDGs to groundwater. We have groundwater a little bit disseminated in other goals, in particular goal 6 on water resources, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all, and in some other agriculture and food production and other goals. But there is no per se. I think we missed an opportunity there to have a real goal on climate change and groundwater per se. UNESCO and UNEC are the co-custodian of the indicator CIS52 on transboundary waters monitoring. And I can tell you that after the first phase results, and now we are in the second phase, the most difficult component of the reports that we received by 153 member states who shared a water system is definitely groundwater. We know very little about our aquifers around the world. And I mean, whatever will be the impact of climate change on these aquifers, and will have a bad impact on water security for many regions. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Very sharp on time, 20 minutes, and brought some good thoughts about the issue that we are discussing today. It seems that water security is also information, good information. And it's important that you call attention for the linkage between social science and environmental science to address climate change impacts. Thank you very much. And let's now speak with our friend, Carlos Molano. Carlos Molano is a civil engineer from Los Andes University in Bogota, Colombia, and obtained his specialization degree in engineering hydrology from the IHE Delft that was mentioned on your presentation. He is professor of groundwater flow and pollution in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Los Andes University, and is vice president of the IAH, International Association of Hydrologists, for the Latin America and the Caribbean. Welcome, Carlos. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And well, also I want to thank all the organization and the scientific committee, especially to Ricardo Andrade and his co-workers. Also, I want to thank Al Sud and his president, Miguel Rangel, Abbas, and Jose Paulo Nieto. Well, I have a presentation. Let me share the screen. So I think okay. So I think you can see now my screen. Oh, okay.
Perfect.
So also I want to thank, well, the Universidad de los Andes, Hydrogeocall, and of course the International Association of Hydrogeologists. This is just a short presentation that some aspects, some items that on water security and climate change that I want to share with you. So water security and climate change is an issue that have been addressed since the end of the last century. Well, it's a problem from the middle of the last century. And Alice, just, I have here some of the publications on climate change from UNESCO, from United Nations, from the ISH, and also we have some conference on water security and climate change. Every 2 years, the last one was in Mexico, the next one will be in Vietnam, and a lot of web page. Well, you can find, we have also in our association a Groundwater and Climate Change Commission. So it's climate change and water security is a big issue of concern. And I want to recall John Cherry, who, well, was interviewed a couple of days ago. Well, he received the Stockholm Water Prize, that is some kind of Nobel Prize in water resources. And also, Dr. Cherry has raised the awareness of why all countries must increase the protection of their groundwater to stay off the looming of water crisis. So water crisis, well, deals with water security and climate change. Well, this, of course, we need water to preserve the life, to progress, and to be happy. So water interacts with the environment and ecosystems. So we need to guarantee that goods and services that natural resources have provided us remain available for present and future generations. Okay, so climate change affects the water cycles, so changing the water holding capacity of the atmosphere, shifting weather patterns, changing evaporation rates, melting frozen water storage, glaciers and permafrost lands, changing general hydrological regimes, changing the frequency of extreme events, and changing the aquifer recharge rate. That is an issue that also Alice presented. And well, I want to emphasize the effects on groundwater resources, that is my field. So climate change affects the water cycle, which in turn impacts groundwater resources. So changing the aquifer recharge rates, impacts on springs, flow-based decrease, impacts on wetlands, swamps, impacts on vegetation, riparian vegetation also, increased seawater intrusion in coastal aquifers, impact groundwater dependable ecosystem. So of course it causes economic and social impacts. So that impacts water security, which also threats to people and environment. So we have to manage water scarcity to ensure water security for people and environment ecosystems. Well, this is the, I think this is another way to see the world water volume. So I take this I adapted from the USGS, and I put these volumes on Colombia, my country, but we have here also Brazil. So all the water on, in, and above Earth is this big sphere. Well, you can see here the diameter. It includes glaciers and all the water in the oceans. So freshwater resources are this second sphere, that medium-sized spheres, that includes freshwater, groundwater, lakes, and rivers. And this very small sphere is just lakes and rivers. So this medium-sized sphere is mainly groundwater. So what I want to emphasize is that the volume of groundwater is about 90% of fresh water resources. So how can we manage the water scarcity, the climate change? Well, usually we use models to make predictions. And you can find in internet many models. This is just a few climate change models. The IPCC have also a lot of models. And well, you can download, some as you can download them for free. And well, I use groundwater models, of course, the very popular MODFLOW and FEFLOW models, but also some educational academic model like spreadsheets. So I want to show you just to see how climate change affects groundwater recharge in a very simple model. Maybe some who attend my courses could see this graphical way to see the water cycle, the hydrological cycle. And just let's move. Okay, that's rain. So the input, you can have also some other model. This is some kind of cartoon model. And sulfide runoff. Okay. Infiltration, which in turn converts to recharge to groundwater recharge. So here is the water, the aquifer, interacting with the environment, the springs here on the left, with rivers, with swamps, with wetlands. And okay, let's continue. Well, the interaction with sulfide water. And okay, yes, regional groundwater flow. You can find here a lake or a sea, evaporation, and okay, also evaporation from the surface water bodies, evaporation for shallow water table, for shallow aquifers, transpiration from plants, and of course, the use of groundwater. So that's, this is some way to, very simple way to see the water cycle. Well, also I teach. I have a course at the university, and also I make some short courses. So some of you probably you have seen this before. And as I told you, okay, I forgot. Well, this is some birds that some birds depend on vegetation that in turn depends on groundwater, for example, riparian vegetation. And also there is here some fish. Yes, because some microorganisms, some fish and microorganisms depends on this transition zone between groundwater and seawater, and it depends on the nutrients and also some minerals that is in this transition zone, the hyporheic zone. So let's continue, and this is a spreadsheet, that's simply the spreadsheet. So just to quantify, we need data to quantify the effect of climate change. That's one of the problems of many countries, the lack of data. And well, this could represent a real aquifer. Here is on the sea, so this is the sea, freshwater sea interface here. And just we can have a research rate for this simple 1D model. This is very simple, 200 millimeters per year. So let's see what's happening if we lower this just 10%. Okay, so 150 millimeters. So that's the way we use models. So one way is, well, of course, to manage water resources, groundwater resources, and also the interaction with the surface. Again, this is 200 millimeters, and this is 180 millimeters. So for this one-dimensional groundwater flow model, it's just 10%. We lower the research 10%. Sometimes the approximation is 10% in the model we use. But if we use and we calibrate correctly the models, you can have impact on the springs. Of course, here you have a spring that disappear. Well, flow-based decrease, impact on wetlands, impact on vegetation, probably some vegetation disappear, impact on groundwater dependable ecosystem. So sometimes, well, if you have less vegetation, more runoff, so in turn, so it is also increase the impact on our groundwater resources. Also, well, you can use model also to see what the increase on the seawater level. So you can see there is, well, because of the scale, you have here the scale, but I don't want to go in details, but you can raise the sea level, and also you can have here seawater intrusion. Let's continue to see other, okay, let me see if I can, yes, let me see if it works. Okay, so if in addition, well, you, well, there is a decrease in the groundwater recharge because of climate change, and you use groundwater, you pump groundwater. So yes, so this is just an Excel, very simple, and also you can have here also some effects. So you have upcoming of seawater intrusion. I don't use for this particular exercise, this is just an academic exercise but could represent real life. And what I like of this simple models is that you can understand in a simple way the behavior of this kind of system. I don't use any programming in this spreadsheet, just the Excel capabilities. Well, let's continue. So also, well, you can quantify the let me put on the pointer. So this is without affecting the research rates that is affected by climate change or by other factors like deforestation. And well, if you lower, well, you can quantify what will be the effect of the spring, the research rate lower, the wet lands, some wetlands probably disappear. Also, you can simulate depletion. So solutions, well, this is just here some solutions. Well, we have to adapt to climate change. We have to build climate resilience. We have to do effective water management to reduce the freshwater availability, to reduce water demand, and a good water governance. So again, I want to end the presentation that we need to guarantee that goods and services that natural resources have provided us remain available for present and future generations. So that's the key, that's the challenge. So thank you, gracias, mucho obrigado.
Thank you, Carlos. It has been very, very instructive, your presentation. It seems that climate change causes a lot of effects, especially on the water cycle. The model that you showed is very, very interesting. We can clearly see how important is groundwater. And as we say at ANA, I used to be the superintendent that was in charge of groundwater in National Water Agency of Brazil. And now I'm director and I supervise the area that has the role of groundwater in Brazil. And we used to say the water is only one, no distinction between groundwater and surface water. And your final screen is very, very wise. Adaptation, resilience, effectiveness, vulnerability, demands, and closing all of that, good water governance. I don't see how to address the issues from climate change, the global warming, without good water governance. Thank you very much for your presentation. I shared on our chat some of the questions that we received, and I will start. We have a few questions for this first round. And the first question that we have is for all of us, but I will give the floor to you, both our panelists. Data from GRACE project and other monitoring results show that the groundwater levels are decreasing in many parts of the world. A study published by USGS affirms that about 25% of the sea level rise is due to groundwater moved from the aquifers. How do you think about that? Is it possible? Do you think that less groundwater in the continents contribute to the rise of the average temperature? What about, how are your thoughts about that? Ladies first, please. Alice.
Hi, thank you, Ricardo. Okay, there is a fantastic paper of one of the authors is Jai Famiglietti, who is known to all of us on exactly GRACE applications to the largest aquifers of the world. Many of these are transboundary. And with GRACE, in fact, I mean, you can only have information of change in mass changes in these gigantic aquifers, like the Guarani, for example, or the Nubian Sandstone aquifer, because of course the sensor of this satellite are not so powerful yet to go and measure the difference of mass in the small aquifers or national aquifers. So I mean, this is of course a restriction of the capacity of the GRACE application, but still is very valid, and still is valid Jai Famiglietti assumption in his paper that say, yeah, I have seen that in these large aquifer system there is a depletion on the water table. And this is, of course, supported also by monitoring data, by field data. I would say that, for example, one of the issues that we have not discussed here about climate change impacts is submarine groundwater discharge. I mean, the Mediterranean Sea, for example, receive a large amount of fresh water from groundwater discharge through coastal aquifers. Why? First of all, because all the Adriatic coast is a karst coastal aquifer. The karst, of course, it is a particular geological formation, so where you can have a real submarine springs channel, very well known by fishers and for the fishing, because around these resurgence of fresh, sweet groundwater, I mean, you know that some fishes are definitely more interesting to be, is fresher, etc., etc. So, I mean, if the recharge of these coastal aquifer, or not only coastal, of very deep aquifer that discharge to the Mediterranean Sea decrease, and if water supply for drinking water, for agriculture, for industry, and for tourism, whatever human use of groundwater increase, as it's expected, considering that population will increase everywhere in the world, and in particular in coastal areas, the submarine groundwater discharge to the ocean, to the sea, will decrease too. And then we will have, as Carlos said, the contrary, the saltwater intrusion that will increase inside highland, mixing with fresh water, and has already happened in several coastal aquifers in the northern Africa, for example, salinize the coastal aquifers. And so, I mean, in the question, there is a mistake. It's definitely the groundwater flow to the ocean, to the sea, that provide fresh water and replenish of fresh water, the sea and the ocean. The other movement is not natural. Really, it's mainly induced by pumping or over pumping. There is this cone of mixture always in all coastal aquifers, but now, of course, is definitely increased, inlined by pumping. So I don't know if I really answered to the question. Something that I wanted to say is that I was requested to make a study on the history of hydrological cycle. And I discovered that Leonardo in the 15th century was a passionate hydrologist. And, but he didn't really capture the essence of the origin of groundwater resources. We had to wait until the 17th century in order to understand that groundwater was coming from rain and not from other systems. The hydrological cycle was not really understood until the 17th century. And what was absolutely strange was that before it was thought that groundwater was coming from the ocean. So maybe this is the origin of the question.
Yeah. You brought a very important issue, saltwater intrusion. That is a big issue that we live in on the coastal areas. Carlos, can you bring us a view about this question that we received?
Yes, well, in fact, Lenny Konikow from USGS, well, he has some numbers about using GRACE and also some other data on aquifer that are being depleted. That, well, part of that depletion in aquifer, that's what it is going to the sea. So it contributes in some quantity to sea level rise. And if you increase the sea level rise, well, you increase also the diameter of the earth. And if you increase the diameter, well, the movement on its axis, well, it increases the inertia of the system. Like the, I don't know the word, well, like the Tio Vivo in parks for children. So if you increase, if you just move your hands, you goes more rapidly. So also there are some calculations on how fast could the earth move, how faster than the 24 hours a day. And also because it's on the sea, the inertia movement increased the diameter in the equator. So, well, I have read some numbers I can't remember, but well, this is some 10 to the minus, I don't know, 10, 20 seconds. So it really do not impact so much. And also they have some figures about what percentage of the seawater level rise is due to groundwater. And well, it's a small percentage, of course.
Seems that is not a big issue.
Seems that is not a big issue, but combined it could be, you know, well, if you rise just 50 centimeters, the seawater level in some flat areas, well, you can very big seawater.
Let me correct myself. It seems that groundwater is not a big issue on the sea level.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure.
The rise of the oceans are a very big issue.
Yes.
It is a very big issue, and it seems that the climate change is affecting a lot the rise of the oceans. And as you saw, as you said, just a little bit is very has a very strong impact on islands especially.
Yes.
Let's go to the second question, and now I will address a question to Alice. But Carlos can also help us on the answer. We, not me, I'm a civil engineer, but the question says, we hydrologists believe that groundwater does not deserve the attention that it deserves from the World Global Water community. Knowing UNESCO from within, what is your experience and feeling about that? What should we do to bring groundwater to the main concern of the world?
Okay, let me say that it's absolutely true that groundwater doesn't have the attention that merits. UNESCO is the only UN agencies in the UN system with a real full-fledged program on groundwater. And I'm the proof of it because I'm the chief of the section on groundwater resources, and there is no other sections on groundwater resources in any other real UN agencies. And we started, I mean, UNESCO before me, of course, in the 70s, started the program on groundwater resources, looking at land subsidence, looking at mapping of groundwater resources and aquifers, the big program of UNESCO on the mapping, the geology and the hydrogeology of the world, the different aspects related to groundwater resources, quality, quantity, vulnerability, with the experts, the criteria for evaluating groundwater and aquifer vulnerability, etc. What to do? I mean, unfortunately, we live in a world where everything has a price, and only things that are of high price are considered by politicians and decision makers very often. And unfortunately, we, the hydrogeologists, are not able to pass the message of the price of groundwater. If we make a calculation, not only from the tap or only from the wells when we take the water out of the aquifer, but as we said, as Carlos said, I mean, all what is depending on an aquifer, on groundwater, has a cost. I mean, if we sum this cost, definitely we have a huge amount of money there that has to be saved, protected, because at the end there will be a loss on economy for everybody. But we are not able, we are not economists, and economists, as I said at the very beginning of my presentation, we need more interdisciplinarity, looking at climate change, looking at groundwater resources. Economists look at water, but very little on groundwater. For example, in the World Bank, we have great colleagues on the team on groundwater, but there is very little studies on the economy of groundwater. And why? Because in the university, we are very much compartmental. I mean, I'm a geologist and I studied geology, hydrogeology, etc. Never law. I never studied law, the water law. I never studied water economy. I mean, we have to make an effort also in the university, in the education system, to be more comprehensive, create linkages on other topics and thematics that can contribute to make something like groundwater more visible. Now, there is a good news, of course, is that fighting and trying the 2022 World Water Development Report will be on groundwater. So we are all invited with UNESCO and with the UN Water to prepare the year of 2022 for groundwater. The World Water Day will be make visible the invisible, groundwater, and definitely UNESCO will call to all the colleagues and all the friends to help putting more vision on and visibility on groundwater for the 2022.
Excellent, excellent news. I was just thinking about that. As we don't see the groundwater, we don't give the real importance that we should. But I think the message is changing. I think groundwater, by the hard side, people are using a lot with no mercy, and we are getting very huge number of problems on groundwater exploitation. And I think it's changing. And you bring a view of a very important, again, brings to me that we need to have a strong linkage between the social science and the environmental science. We need to address these issues to many more people. And indeed, a very good news is that in 2022, we will have groundwater on the Global Water Report. That is a very good news. Carlos, do you want to complement this question, or we can go?
No, just that because it's a hydro resource where you can see it. You just can reach the system through some points, some walls, and surface water you could see, well, everywhere.
Yeah.
That's one of the points. Yes.
I will bring now a question to you. How fracking affects climate change and groundwater? And is that process being launched in Colombia?
Well, fracking could affect groundwater resources. Yes. So also, but not. Well, I don't know much about, but I don't think it affects climate change. But fracking in Colombia, well, we have no fracking at all now. And some pilot programs, well, there were just finished that pilot programs and will be 1 or 2 years delay. And of course, it's an issue, and well, we can talk much about that. And one of the problems is also because that hydro resource that we need data to see if really fracking could affect or not water resources. So that's my point of view.
It's a wise point of view. It has a very big discussion about that, and I think you're right. We need to get more information to see if, especially if it affects climate change. I will bring now a question that can be answered by all of us, but I will leave the floor to you and to Alice to clarify. As hydrologists, we see the importance of groundwater in supplying cities and the countryside today. Its large storage with the capacity to regulate supply. Groundwater is one of the best alternatives to increase water security. Question is, why does groundwater not get the attention it needs from most governments? What do you need? What to do to improve this visibility? It's linked with the answer that Alice brought to us, and I think we one of the most important issue that we should address is to get this discussion to high-level politics. It's what we call hydrodiplomacy in the World Water Council. So it's important that we bring that visibility to what is not visible. We just talked about that, and maybe we can complement the answer, the thoughts that we had just now to this question that we received. Alice, can you help us on that?
Well, it's the first part of the assumption of this question that is looking at groundwater in urban areas. That is very much interesting because the second part, I mean, we have developed a little bit already. Yeah, definitely. we should more also on groundwater resources management and governance in urban areas. In particular on mega cities where, as we know very well, groundwater resources sometimes are the main resource of fresh water in regions like arid or semi-arid zones. Definitely, there is a mixture of new technology to be applied for groundwater monitoring in urban areas and engineering and definitely the urban planning that has to be reconsidered, being much more environmentally oriented and friendly than what it was before. I mean, our cities have to change. The new cities and the cities have to be reorganized in a way to be more friendly to water resources management and use than what it was in the past. Now that we know that there are problems, that there are impacts due also to climate change, reducing the resource that are at our disposal. So definitely there is a new vision for that. It's not a case. In one of my slides, I think the first or the second, I took a picture of what is now becoming very familiar to all of our cities, the green walls. I mean, these vegetations that is now growing up on the walls of the houses and the monuments, the new manufacturers in the cities. This need of all of us to have more environment, more green environment around us in the cities. But definitely this has to be linked with the different management of water resources and groundwater resources works. About groundwater, I would also say that we made a study years ago with the FAO legal department in quite a very large number of countries to understand and to see what was the situation of the national water law related to groundwater. And there were very little, so few countries had real groundwater law in their national water law. So little groundwater still there in the governance of water resources. And it is a shame because as Carlos said, the groundwater, I mean, water is one with the different environmental and physical and chemical tracks. But water is one, it's the hydrological cycle. Having said that, the way how we have to cost, to manage, to govern, and to prohibit use of groundwater is not yet at the level has to be in many countries of the world.
Carlos, please.
Well, maybe to talk a little bit about the storage characteristic of groundwater. For example, in the high plain that it's in US, which is one of the largest world aquifer, well, the recharge is very little recharge in the aquifer, but they have been used, the storage of groundwater for, I think for one of the big agricultural areas in the US. So they are using that storage, the replenishment of that aquifer is very low. So to use the storativity of an aquifer for some periods, and some period could be hundreds of years, as in US, We use also the cities, small cities, towns around Bogota city in the Bogota plain. The recharge is very, very low, but they uses the storage capacity of the aquifers. But there will be useful for some period of time. Could be some years, hundreds of years, probably. So we have to keep in mind that.
Yeah.
We are in our last 15 minutes, and I think that we should try to fix to end our session sharply at 1 p.m. Brazilian time. And I would like to make a linkage between what we discussed right now, water use in communities, and issues that we are facing due to fracking as an example. And I would like to ask, we received a question, very short question that I would like to address to you both. What is the bigger problem that we have? Over exploitation or contamination? Or both? Or both?
Fantastic. I mean, I would say both, and they both are linked each other, definitely. Unfortunately, we know that it is really something to approach with precautionary studies and investment in order to avoid aquifer contaminations and groundwater pollution, because it's much more difficult. And this is we learn at school, at universities. The first things that the teachers and the professors tell us. I mean, it's much more difficult to clean an aquifer and groundwater than a river. So I mean, this is true. I mean, we should definitely make all possible investment in money and technology and policy to avoid groundwater pollution and aquifer contaminations. But of course, the one is a cause of the other sometimes. And over pumping can aggravate groundwater pollution and contamination. Back to the storage, of course, again related to over pumping and contamination. Management of aquifer recharge is a technique very much developed, for example, in Australia, where some of the best experts are providing us with great best practices, and definitely something that should be more used, more known, more applied, because management of aquifer recharge with different technologies can cope and can help us to overcome, when it's possible, not everywhere, of course, when the technology and the geology allows us, can definitely help us to mitigate overpumping and contamination and pollution.
And you, Carlos, what do you think about that? What is the big issue that we are facing?
Oh, we are facing in fact, these two issues, but we have to add climate change. And well, these three issues combined is, secure water. We need to secure water, both in quantity and in quality. So there is no, the way is, how can we manage that? And that's the challenge, to face that problems. And it's from many sides. And in one word is groundwater governance. So we need water management, efficient natural resources, we need economists, we need politicians to be involved, we need people to be involved, we need the communities to be involved. And of course, there are many organizations that we have to combine all our efforts to face that problems.
Well, we have 10 minutes, and I will provoke both of you to close our session. I would like to ask your thoughts, and I will give you 3 minutes each, about how can we bring to the public, bring to the society the results of many important studies that were developed by many institutions around the world. How to take them off the shelf. We face a lot of very good documents produced that goes from the desk to the shelf and never reaches the public. And the other reflection that I would like to hear from both of you is how to make more efficient the approach to our legislators. How can we do that? We had here on this session very good reflections about climate change, about problems that we are facing on misinformation, and we talked about groundwater law. In some places, we have in a specific law about that, but it's not on the front page yet. We have 8 minutes, so let's 3 minutes for each of you, closing this so important session that we provided, and give your final thoughts, and if possible, giving us some good ideas for these two issues that I brought.
Okay, in 3 minutes, so what UNESCO is doing really on that. First of all, we are now investing on conjunctive management, surface water and groundwater conjunctive management. Second, we are working with lawyers in order to, for example, in Africa, together with AMCOV and AMBO, that are the committee of ministers of waters and the network of river basin organizations, talk with surface water people and having, several training courses and education and capacity for a river basin organization on groundwater governance and groundwater law at national and international level. And third, we have to really believe in our young people. I think the youth and the young people have demonstrated in the last years that they are taking climate change and environment seriously. We have more and more their voice in the net, in the WhatsApp, in the chats, and I think we have to try to simplify, remaining very much honest, but simplify a little bit our work for politicians that, of course, are not engineers and hydrogeologists.
Thank you. Carlos, please.
Yeah, well, I think it's a work that we have to do in each country, in each region. Well, we have, for example, in Colombia, we have done something about that. The IDEAM, the Institute of Water, they have dealt with some climate change web page and some information that is available just for politicians, for economics. And that's one way to start. And also, well, this kind of meetings, Congress, UNESCO plays an important role in these United Nations. And we have to involve also, well, the scientific community, but also, as Alice told us, to simplify the concepts. And also, we need also some training for non-groundwater professionals to teach them, yes, training them how these kind of resources could be managed in an efficient way. And of course, young people. Well, I think young people is the, well, is the future. And so also, well, to manage to in our institution, in academic level, in scientific work. So I think that's the way to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. The floor is open for the last comments, and we are heading to the end of our panel that was, in my view, very well presented by Alice and Carlos. Thank you very much for your time, for your thoughts, very good presentations. I'm sure that the public is very happy on our session.
Thank
Alice,
you very much, Ricardo.
Carlos, thank you very much. And questions that may not been responded, I hope the organization can address them to the people that asked. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to host this session, and I hope to see you soon in the physical International Association Hydrology Congress to be held in Brazil, in São Paulo, in Brazil next year. Thank you very much. Thank you, the audience, for the patience, and have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much. Thank you, Alice.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.